Welcome to AromaticChat, the podcast that introduces you to registered, clinical, and certified aromatherapists around the world. Every other week, my bestest friend, partner in crime, and business partner sits down with a different aromatherapist to learn about their aromatic journey and how they use aromatherapy in their lives and businesses. AromaticChat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching. Your host is Melissa, Master Transformational Coach and registered aromatherapist.
Hey friends, welcome to podcast episode number 102, Aromatic Chat with Dr. Florian Birkmayer. Dr. Birkmayer is a wounded healer, ex-psychiatrist, and aromatic psychedelic coach and teacher. He has been working with plant aromas for decades for emotional and personal transformation and combining them with psychedelic therapy since 2011. His frustration with mainstream psychiatry's overemphasis on medications to cover up symptoms led him to an ongoing search, his own wounded healer's journey, into what healing truly means. He is committed to learning from and working with plant aromas and psychedelics, deeply related alive allies who reconnect us to the most powerful part of our psyche, our own unconscious. They also reconnect us to nature and the living world to take our rightful place and overcome the cut-offness that some people call Wataiko. You are in for a real treat. So, let's get started. Florian, I am just really excited that you said yes to being on the show because you have some really exciting things going on, but also just a very unique perspective on aromatics. And I'm just really looking forward to hearing all about it and sharing it with my listeners. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. I'm really excited to share.
Absolutely. So the very first thing that I always do is find out what your aromatic journey is. Like, how did you get to this place living in an what do you call it? An airship?
An earth ship.
Earth ship, living in an earth ship in New Mexico. I mean, doing all of the things that you're doing in aromatics.
Well, that's a great question. And in fact, the earth ship is really part of that. When I first moved here 25 years ago, I had this vision of a banana tree behind sort of a big sofa chair. And then my unconscious was already giving me a vision of the future, and that's kind of the theme. And then I discovered earth ships, and then I was very blessed to find out this rare opportunity. So the nice thing about it, it's a passive house, it's off-grid, it's built from garbage in essence. And so our carbon footprint on our house is minimal. The sun heats it, solar hot water. And I'm just so blessed. I look outside, I'm surrounded by trees. I mean, we don't need a study for this, but these conifers make their own microclimate. There's a study out of Scandinavia that they cloud seed, and so just being in deep relationship with nature and that deep connectedness, I couldn't. If you asked me 25 years ago if a genie in a bottle had appeared and said, "What would you wish for?" I couldn't have wished for this. So my life is much better than my wildest dreams would have been 20 years ago, and I'll just jump into the aromatic journey. I mean, it really started in childhood. I remember in the 70s, my grandfather in Austria, on my mom's side, he went to Switzerland a lot to get away. And one of the very first commercial products was JHP. It's still being made. And so I remember smelling that. And then, there was sauna culture in Austria. And so they put different products that presumably had essential oils in them. So I was very aware of that. And then jump forward in medical school, the details escape me, but someone said, "Oh, if you smell this essential oil, it'll really help you study." And it did. And then I became known because friends of mine were like, "What's that weird smell? You smell weird." But I was like on fleek, listening, just absorbing the massive amounts of information. And then in psychiatry residency, it was a bit of a shock because psychiatry disguises itself as a science. It's in many ways a pseudoscience. And so when I would say I'm really interested in holistic things, people literally said to me, "I wouldn't say that too loud around here." And so I sort of went inward. And then when I opened my private practice, I was liberated. A friend of mine said I jumped out the allopathic window. So these interests I had been cultivating, I was finally able to share with my clients, and it started in the office. If a client would recount a traumatic event, and you can tell because their eyes start fluttering, and you feel like they're somewhere else. And out of desperation, really, having them smell that scent, based, of course, on my long personal experience, bringing them right back. I was like, "Wow, this is incredible!" And then I did an apprenticeship to become a master aromatherapist, and then in my private practice again, I was sort of unleashed, and I had a lot of clients that were really survivors or burned out of the conventional system. And one thing that happened already back in 2010, 2011, I started hearing about ketamine, which is a legal psychedelic treatment. It was first approved as an anesthetic, so I would give people that, and always in combination with aromas. And then even recently, a few years ago, we would organize these ketamine groups, and that's an emerging thing. But we always gave people aromas, and people were sometimes more excited about what aroma I'm going to get this week as opposed to what dose of ketamine I'm going to get. So that's really the current culmination of my interests. And yeah, let me stop there.
Wow. As a holistic provider, hearing you say that gives me hope.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, I'm sorry, that's a trigger for me, but I think our society is under a spell. We're in this blindness, this cut-offness. The term wetico is being bandied about, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's a term in, I think, plain striped languages to mean this mind virus or this mind spell of cut-offness. And one of its symptoms is there's nothing wrong with me. And capitalism and patriarchy really depend on that. In order for me to say nature is a resource to be exploited and other people are my competitors in the zero-sum game, I have to be cut off. If I'm like, I am another you, you are another me, this tree that I'm looking at is looking back, it's a conscious being, that's a completely different way. And I don't think we could be and would be in the place we're in now, where we're really in, the term now is polycrisis or metacrisis, but I think the polycrisis, metacrisis is this crisis of the spell we're under. And that's, if I had to boil down what I want to do to one word, it's to reconnect, reconnect myself, reconnect to parts of myself that might be uncomfortable, reconnect to each other, and reconnect to nature.
Oh my goodness. I actually just posted on Instagram today about connection. Like I feel like that is the thing. That's what we were created for. We were designed for connection to each other, connection to self, connection to higher power, connection to nature,
Yes.
all of it. So
yes.
I love you, Florian. I just love you already. I just love you. This is awesome.
Well, we're connecting, and what brought us together is aromas. I call aromas the molecules of connectedness, because when you smell something, you're right there. You can't say, oh, if you're working with a client and you give the client an aroma, it's not like, oh, I'm going to watch you react to it. You're going to have a reaction. And look, aromas brought us together. And if you look about, why do we have a sense of smell? Our species evolved in a world rich with all these volatile molecules traveling through the air that the plants had already evolved millions of years before. Initially for pollinators, we evolved as a species in this rich environment where these molecules are constantly talking to us. And now, again, part of this cut-offness is we're blind to the scent that's always talking to them. And scent is really just the alphabet or the language. But in the same way, when you hear a beautiful poem or when we're talking, there's a spirit, a soul. The smell is really a reminder there's a soul trying to connect with me.
I always say that the plants were here long before humans were here because we needed the plants. There was a design to how things were put together, and they came first.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry to geek out on you, but even before medical school, I asked, well, why do we have dopamine and serotonin as neurotransmitters? Dopamine's a very bad molecule. Its breakdown product accumulates in the brain. It's toxic. It's like, that's bad design. But dopamine was a plant molecule, as was serotonin, for millions of years before we walked the earth. So it's like, we're the same. We're part of the same network. History, modernity, the structure of the ego, of the brain, maybe, is what's created this cut-offness. And now we just need to wake up and reconnect.
I feel the same way. So are you currently seeing patients, clients?
I'm not working as a psychiatrist anymore. I take great emphasis on the work. I'm an ex-psychiatrist because, the diagnosing people is like putting them in a box that they can never themselves get out of. And the medications, this is a decades-long journey, are both damaging and disempowering. When you're on a psych med, it really messes with your sense of self. But what we do is we do consulting coaching sessions, basically, where it's, one of my long lessons from my previous careers, I don't want to turn anybody into a professional patient where their entire life revolves around their identity as a patient, making it to their appointment. So we want to empower you. We want to reconnect you, and then you run with it. And I think the aromas are great with that, because when you learn to partner with aromas, and that's really an emphasis, the aromas, the essential oils, they're not a product. They are a living emanation of the living soul of the plant. And when we partner with them, we learn from them. And that, when we remind people of that, then they run with it. So we do see clients. We call it consultation or coaching, but it's really, the emphasis is we want to empower you.
I'm loving our conversation already, because I feel the same way. I tell my clients, I don't want you to be a client forever. I want you to get well and go. I want you to get out. You don't need me for that long. And it goes against everything that the system wants us to do.
Absolutely. And even, as a side note, what's happened when I did ketamine 15 years ago, 14 years ago, there was no one else was doing it. There was a couple of researchers, and but there wasn't these established protocols. And what happens now is when people go into a ketamine clinic, people say, okay, we're going to schedule you for 6 to 8 treatments, and then we'll do maintenance. So the entire framework is already, you're going to be a chronic patient, you're going to be with us for a long time. And there's something that really bothers me. And it's a spell, it's by the time someone walks into a doctor's office, not just for ketamine, really for anything, they've already said, I've lost touch with my own inner ability to find my way, and I'm going to project that unconsciously onto this other person. And that's very seductive to the other person. As a doctor, or really any healer, one of the dangers is this ego inflation. So I'm using a lot of jargon. When all these people come to you, oh, doctor, please give me the answers. We have to, it's like, wait a minute, you have the answers. We can guide you. And in a way, it's not about the answers. It's really about the path. When you start with the medicine Buddha meditation, you inhale the blue light air and heal yourself, and exhale the gray smoke. And then after a while, you inhale the gray smoke of the world, and you become the being of transformation that exhales the blue light. And that's, our obstacles become our stepping stones. It's not, oh, what is wrong with me, but is, what resilience do I have? What allies do I have? What part of myself that I need to integrate, that I need to reconnect with, that I need to accept is being brought up right now.
That's amazing. I just hope everybody is hearing all of this, because you're saying the same things that a lot of the people that I run with and myself are saying.
We get tricked into this cut-offness. And again, part of the cut-offness is think nothing is wrong with me. Yeah. There's a network in the brain called the default mode network. And all of us have experienced it. When you're driving to the store or going to a place, the office, you've been 100 times, you get there, and you don't even remember the drive. It's like autopilot or screensaver mode. Now, the interesting thing, it's more than that. It's been shown to be involved in a lot of chronic mental conditions, depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse. And so you can, one reason these conditions are so hard to treat is because with any of them, you become convinced there is no, when you're depressed, it's like, I can't even imagine not being depressed. I can't even imagine not being in trauma response mode. And again, the word trauma actually comes from the Greek word for wound, which is that cut-offness. And what's so great, so we need to recognize it, and recognize that these ruts we're in, this default mode we're in, is not the whole world. And the other thing is that this story, this is the whole world, this is who I am. One of the core functions of the default mode network is what people who are interested in psyche call the ego, the story of myself. It creates this story of myself. And how do we break out of that? Especially if that story is tied up in a very rigid identity, often attached to illnesses. And, psychedelics dissolve that or open up the default mode network, but so do aromas. When you smell an aroma, I see it all the time. I'm sure you've seen it. something shifts. We kind of get out of default mode network. We click out of intellect, we click out of ego. And that's what's so exciting about it, is that that's what we all need. And aromas do that so beautifully.
You've talked about, using psychedelics and essential oils, but how can we actually improve psychedelic assisted therapy with essential oils?
Scent is ancient spiritual technology. So I think the use of both plant spirit medicine, psychedelic molecules, and aromas, they were always used together in many cultures. Let's take the ancient Egyptians. They used the blue lotus, which was a psychedelic and also an aromatic, and actually in their cosmogony and their origin of the world story, it's the first thing that happens. Father Earth and Mother Sky get together, and their child is the blue lotus. Of course, they had this very elaborate use of aromatics, not essential oils in the modern sense, but very sophisticated. Let me give you an example. Like the pharaoh had these stylized beards, and of course the archetype sort of at the origin of the pharaoh is Osiris, and he's often pictured holding two staffs, and one of them is the origin of the modern bishop's crook, but the other one, it's often called a flail, but it was actually an instrument for collecting the labdanum resin. And so the scent of labdanum, back then it was the resin, now we have essential oil or absolute of it, was deeply enmeshed with that archetype. And it was very much about facing shadow issues in a way. The pharaoh was sort of this weird overlap between the sacrificial lamb and the king, where his most important job is just to sort of be faced with things, both using blue lotus, both using labdanum together. Another example is in the Torah, in the Old Testament, there's a description of the incense that was burned only in the temple, the Ketoret. And it was, you could only use it there. When you smelled it, it meant you were in the presence of the divine. And, when I'd go to Native American church ceremonies, while you're worshiping with peyote, they're burning cedar, they're burning sweetgrass. So the olfactory experience is an integral part of the experience. In South America, there's perfumeros, there's agua de Florida. In India, there's a lot of flowers and other aromatics they use. So first I want to say this combination has always been there. And I just read this interesting book just out called Tripping on Utopia, but the origins of modern psychedelic therapy really happened in the 40s and 50s as a really CIA sponsored, these molecules are really powerful, let's figure out how we can use them. But a lot of the origins of modern psychedelic therapy are actually kind of a little bit in the dark. People don't know them, including here's a clinical setting, here you need the therapist. And so to try and get back to the original point, there is a frustration. Some people are aware of it. It's mostly unspoken in behavioral health. More and more people are anxious, more and more people are depressed, more and more people have trauma, more and more people use substances, which is really self-medication for a lot of these conditions. COVID just blew the roof off of it. The numbers are going up, and our conventional treatments aren't doing much. So one thing that happened is, spoken or unspoken, there's this anxiety about what are we doing, can we do better? So there's what I call a messianic projection on psychedelics now. It's the shiny new toy. It's the promise that we can finally help people. And then because they're they've been used in various cultures, they were heavily researched in the 50s. We know that there are limitations to it. There are dangers. And so I think that more and more people I meet, colleagues, are like, well, how can I enhance this experience? And so one way that people do it is often they'll have playlists, they'll have music. And I got to tell you, the music is often purely the influence of the anxiety of the practitioner saying, oh, I want you to have a nice experience, or here's some music. Mm-hmm. Once that energy, that emotional energy is in the field, especially if it's not acknowledged by the therapist or the guide, it's going to influence the journey. Right. Aromas really are their own intelligences. When people do psychedelic therapy with aromas, there's really four intelligences, souls in the room. There's the client's soul, the guide, just sitters, a therapist's soul, the soul of the psychedelic molecule, and the soul of the aromatic molecule or molecules. And so they each have their own agenda, conscious and unconscious. And so aromas, just on that level, because they have their own agenda, they're, for me, a lot less of a expression of the anxiety of the therapist like the music. It's much more like, let's bring something else in. And then other ways, I mean, people think, oh, it smells nice, very superficial, or, this essential oil is relaxing. It's much more sophisticated than that. So one thing that happens is, as I already mentioned, the default mode network, both aromas and psychedelics open up and kind of weaken the default mode network, so we're less stuck in the ruts. Another way to say that is aromas and psychedelics help us bypass the intellect, but a lot of people, when they use psychedelics, there's a lot of resistance. They're kind of holding onto their seat, and they don't want to surrender to the experience. And aromas, it's like a spiritual hug saying, oh, come on in, the water's fine, or I'll be with you. And there's also an aspect of immanence, like when you smell something, you're right here, right now, which I think, again, is a beautiful balance with the psychedelic. The other one is on a neuroanatomical level. The first place that, we smell with our consciously smell, unconsciously, we have olfactory receptors in every organ of our body, but conscious smell is the olfactory bulb at the top of our nose, bypasses the thalamus, goes right into the oldest part of the brain called the piriform cortex. And the interesting thing is that it's the theory is that most psychedelics work on serotonin type 2A receptors, so we can deconstruct that. But that same piriform cortex is covered in those receptors. So where the aromas go, first step is also a place where the psychedelics go. So neuroanatomically, they're working on the same areas that then go everywhere else. Even structurally, there was this famous chemist, Sasha Shulgin, the guy who rediscovered MDMA, which is now being studied for its benefits for various conditions, especially PTSD. In a footnote in one of his books said, oh, I can think of 10 molecules where if you just change a carbon to a nitrogen, so just the slightest change and a minimal change, you go from an aromatic molecule to a psychedelic molecule. The most famous example is actually saffrol, which is in saffron, sassafras, and you change that tiny thing, you get MDMA, the molecule I just mentioned. There are other examples like L-amycin, which is in various aromatic plants, and 3,4,5-TMA. So Shulgin rattled off a whole list, and the most important part of that statement is he ends his footnote by saying nature's trying to tell us something. So why are they related? And these molecules are all made by plants. So to me, they're letters in the same alphabet. And I think that with the resistances people have going into the experience, and with the unconscious baggage that the practitioners project, saying, oh, conventional treatments don't work, I want you to have a nice time. I think aromas invite us for reconnection. They invite us to trust in that bigger sense. That was a very long answer. I apologize, but that's why aromas, they're not like music. They're not like a sheet blanket. They're not like an eye mask, psychedelic therapy. They are the next level.
Yeah, I feel like nature is quietly waiting for us to wake up and take notice. You have a gift for the listeners.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So if you go to our website, aromanosis.com, and I think you'll put the link somewhere, there's a pop-up. And if in the pop-up you enter your name and email address, we will email you a chapter from our new book. And the chapter is called The Molecules of Connectedness. So I already alluded to it, but the chapter really spells it out in a much deeper level. And then it's a chapter from a book called Essential Oils for Psychedelic Therapy, which you can get on Amazon. So, but the chapters really stand alone because it really honors and gives us a framework, a way of thinking about why aromas are the molecules of connectedness. And I think that's really important. That, again, they're not tools, they're not products. They are allies, and they invite us to reconnect.
Is this a book for clinicians, or is this a book for everyone?
Well, it was written with the clinician in mind, but honestly, I think it's for everyone. It's a very practical book. The framework we present in the book about really looking at the psyche holistically, really honoring when we get these sometimes uncomfortable message from parts of ourselves we're not aware of, which includes our physical body, it includes our emotional body, includes our mental patterns, it includes our spiritual body. When these come up and aromas really open us up to them, it's really good to have a framework so that you can say, that funny feeling I'm getting in my stomach, instead of saying, oh, I don't want to feel that, you can say, oh, what a gift. What does this mean? The same with emotions. I think I'll often say to people, when something makes us uncomfortable, when we feel a challenging emotion, that's really the gift wrap. well, let's take the gift wrap off. What's underneath here? So the framework is as important as which molecules to work with. There are some of our favorite power allies, labdanum that I already mentioned. We talk about rose, we talk about helichrysum. Rose is just so hard opening. And really in any sort of work, whether it's psychedelics or not, we have to be present and we have to be open-hearted. So it's a book for anyone who's interested in working on themselves.
You talk about yourself as being a wounded healer. Can you just expand on that just a little bit for the audience?
Early on, I wanted to be a really good psychiatrist, know all my medications. And then I realized what I was doing was really keeping people trapped. And then in my private practice, I was trying to be more holistic. And I found a lot of people who wanted to come off psych meds. And there's this massive honoring of their journey. But even then, I read this book, The Alchemy of Healing by Edward Whitman, who was a Jungian and a homeopath. And I literally flung that book across the room because it was like looking in the mirror. That's me. He said, when the healer has a part of themselves that they unconsciously feel is unlovable, untreatable, not worthy of attention, they unconsciously project that part onto their clients. So I realized as much as I wanted to be there for my clients, I was keeping them trapped. And there's a quote by Jung, when the wounded healer doesn't deal with their wounds, they become the wounded wounder. And so it was like this, that's why I was like, it's this cold mirror saying, oh my God, I'm keeping my clients trapped. I closed my private practice in 2015. And at first I was like, oh, I'll just take a few months off, but I just haven't. That setting is very pathologizing, is very trapping, dehumanizing for the client and the healer. So the wounded healer is really a change in focus from what can I do for you to what is coming up for me. And then my commitment, maybe it'll ripple out to someone, maybe it'll inspire someone else. If I pretend I have all the answers, it's like I create an invisible barrier to accessing that part of me that acknowledges that I'm wounded. And then that's the message to the client. Oh, no, you can't access that. You need someone like me. This is the trap, again, that both clients and therapists get trapped in. But if we turn it inward and say, okay, what is this bringing up in me? What discomfort? That is a lifelong path. And that then influences. And we actually just finished a retreat last week called the Visionary Healer Retreat, because we went from, we go from wounded wounder to wounded healer to visionary healer. And it is really about that shift in focus, because I think when we really commit to our path saying, oh, I didn't know I was doing this, people talk about privilege now and any sort of blind spot we have where we're engaging in unwillingness to look at ourselves or keeping clients trapped in whatever way is worthy of examination. And then the doorway opens. And that's been a lifelong path and will continue to be a lifelong path. And that's really how we avoid trapping our clients, making them carry that unconscious part of ourselves that we're not willing to acknowledge. That's what healing is I'm going to stop make you unconsciously carrying my crap. That's the essence of healing, I think.
So there's an awakening happening.
Yes. There's a lot of people saying, what are we doing? And that's really inspiring to me.
There's an energy wave right now happening, and it's touching a lot of healers.
Yes.
Along this thought process.
I had the suspicion that hopelessness was not a natural reaction that arises from in us, but it's actually a thought virus, and I like the term thought virus more than meme. A meme isn't a cute picture of a cat on Facebook. A meme is a self-replicating piece of information, like a gene. That's why Richard Dawkins named it meme. But I think thought virus really makes us think. And so I suspected that hopelessness was a thought virus that was spreading in our noosphere and our awareness it was an engineered thought virus to make people feel it's too late, it's hopeless. And while I had that intuition, then months or years later, I read an article, it's somewhere in my Substack, I linked to it, that this is actually true, that the fossil fuel companies sort of released this thought virus hopelessness into the wild to make us less feel like there's nothing we can do, which is, paralysis. Now, the interesting thing is that inward, it is very easy to get overwhelmed when I say, oh, what can little me do about the climate crisis? What can little me do about all the conflict in the world? easy to get overwhelmed. But I can always work on myself. So that shift in focus I just talked about, that to me is the overcoming, the antidote, the cure to hopelessness. I feel there is hope. I feel there is this critical mass building of people who are questioning, and that questioning is rippling out, and it's going out beyond the holistic healing field. It's touching, I think, behavioral health, and I think it's really almost, I think it's going to touch society as a whole, where people are going to say we can't continue like this, and it's not hopeless. And I got to say, I'm beyond hopeless. I have hope again.
What are you working on right now that you're really excited about?
A lot of clients and people I meet, they say, oh, when you talk about aromas and how deeply they touch you, I just don't have that reaction. And, we talked earlier about how as a culture, we've gotten blind to scent. So we realized we needed to give people an opportunity to really practice connecting deeply. So once a month, again, the link is on our website, we have something called an aromatic journey. When people sign up, we mail them an essential oil, and then wherever they are in the world, and we have people from all over, we smell the same oil, and we do an in-depth meditation, 45 minutes, sometimes longer, to really get people to practice, to learn how to smell again. Then we talk about the shared experience. And one thing that happens, I already talked about aromas as being as allies. Before we talk about what it does after the meditation, people will share, and there'll often be similar experiences or experiences that really complement each other. And it's like through the guiding, the going deeper, and then people sharing, it's like we're all reflecting the multifaceted power of whichever aroma it is. I really think that having a opportunity in whatever way for people to really practice reconnecting, reclaiming their sense of smell, that I'm really excited about. So we do it in the Aromatic Journey, and I'm sure there's other ways. The other thing is at the end of June, again, it's on the website, we're doing a weekend intensive class on how to use essential oils in psychedelic therapy. When people sign up, we mail you a kit so that while we're in this non-smelling realm of Zoom where we're connected but we can't smell each other, we're all smelling the same oils. And that is our sort of unique way how we do online classes. So that will be at the end of June. We wrote this book, Essential Oils for Psychedelic Therapy, that's available. The chapter is free. The other thing that's sort of further on down, at some point before the end of the year, we'll have another Visionary Healer Retreat, and we're constantly sharing and trying to figure out what's the best way we can offer our approach. So the one-offs like the Aromatic Journey are great, the weekend intensives. We've had mentorships in the past online that might happen again, the in-person retreat that's 5 days or 6 days long. So again, sometimes, things arise from our unconscious. We don't even know. So all I can say is check the website and there'll be exciting things happening soon.
So what else are you passionate about? You're obviously extremely passionate about aromas, but what else are you passionate about?
Well, I mean, with aromas, I'm passionate about self-development, which again is, there's a quote by Jung, we become enlightened not by seeking more and more light, but by confronting the darkness within. I'm really passionate about sustainable living, which has become a buzzword, but living in the earthship to me is such gratitude, and living in nature. I lived in cities most of my life until the last 8 years, and I'm just so grateful for how nature has invited me to become more of myself. I love hiking, I love reading, I love writing. There's several books in me that I just wish I had more time with all the work we have to do, but those are my big passions. I'm really grateful that I get to live a dream that if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I couldn't have wished for this, and it's better than anything that I could have wished for 20 years ago.
How can people find you? Because the mission of the podcast is to connect people to you. So how can they find you and what you're doing?
Yeah. I think the best is aromanosis.com, our website. You can join the email list. You can get the free chapter. I do also have a Substack, which is my new. I love writing, and so Substack is more bite-sized pieces. So I think you'll put the link in, and people can sign up for my Substack and read. Those are really the main areas. I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I have to say, I was off social media hardcore for a number of years, and I'm sort of back in because And I'm not crazy about it, but if you want to find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, go for it. But number one is sign up for our email list on Aromanosis. We send out emails, about once a week, and it's, just what we're thinking about, what we're working on, what's going on for us. So people, with every email we send out, we get a lot of email replies saying, "Oh, thank you. This is exactly what I needed to hear." So it's a way of just being connected, the molecules of connectedness.
I always just love to hand the floor back over to my guest for any final words that you have, or if you feel like maybe I missed something, this is your time.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say shout out to my wife, Kathy Skipper. Again, we were married, we worked together. She's been my greatest teacher, my greatest inspiration. I love my life because we inspire each other, we pull each other up. Yeah, I'm grateful, and I wish for anybody that live your best life. I think it's there, and sometimes it takes a leap of faith, or it takes, again, dissolving that default mode network, those ruts where we think this is all I could do, and we're all capable of it. We're all capable of being truly ourselves.
Florian, this has been incredible. I have enjoyed talking to you tremendously. We're on the same path. We're doing the same work side by side, but slightly differently. And I love that. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity. And again, I'm just grateful to the aromas, the molecules of connectedness, for connecting us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this Aromatic Chat episode with wounded healer, ex-psychiatrist, and aromatic psychedelic coach and teacher, Dr. Florian Birkmayer. I will include all of the links to all of the things in the show notes. Would you leave a review for the show on Apple Podcast? Every review you leave helps new listeners to find the show and support the mission of the show, which is to connect people with the aromatherapist that meets their health and wellness needs. Aromatic Chat is produced by Lemon Balm Coaching. I'm your host, Melissa, life and wellness coach for the broken, exhausted, hopeless, and overwhelmed. I'm a master transformational coach, registered aromatherapist, and certified body code practitioner. I will see you next week with our next episode. Until then, peace, love, and aromatics.